Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Classroom Hacks book review of Tara Westover's Educated. But before we get to that, as a reminder, we are live from the Pantheon of Pedagogy, the mecca of methodology, your vacation from vacation, your sauna of study, where you can learn to seriously take teaching not so seriously. This is, and we are, Classroom Hacks. Wow, it's been a while since I got to do our introduction, and I do miss it. And as a reminder, this is the book review section of our YouTube content page. Like I said, our page will be divided into a few different areas. Obviously, we'll have the sections or the playlist, I should say, for the podcast, and we'll have the playlist for reviews of books, podcasts, and other educational things. We'll have our top 5 area. Got a lot of things on the horizon for our YouTube page, but this is our second review. If you haven't checked it out already, please go ahead and listen to, if you have a moment, to our book review for James Clear's Atomic Habits. It was a fantastic read. Great way to start off your new year, especially if you're trying to stick to some of those resolutions or just figure out how to create and keep new and good habits for your life. And now we are transitioning over to another banger, as the kids say, but just a fantastic read all around in Tara Westover's Educated. And as we usually will start, just a brief background and synopsis of the book. Essentially, Westover's Educated is broken up into 3 parts. The first part describes Westover's life from her birth on Buck's Peak, a mountain in rural Idaho. And this is someplace where she continues to go back at different parts of the book. It's a kind of a metaphor also just for the sense of loyalty and the sense of home and the sense of belonging, and also sort of representative of the struggle that one has to go through in order to break away from the chains or confines or even the nostalgia of what one would refer to as home. And in part 1, she also kind of goes through this growth and this coming of age where she's slowly but surely learning about what it means to be educated, and not just from an academic standpoint, but just from a personal growth and personal evolution standpoint. Throughout the book, she uses various pseudonyms for her and her, well, not her, but her family. And you are going to become acquainted with several characters who play reoccurring roles in her life. And so you hear primarily about her father, Gene, and her mother, Faye. Obviously, as I said, those are pseudonyms. And then you also are coming into contact with her brother, Sean, who plays a reoccurring role outside of herself. And so these are some of the primary characters that you hear and you see most, or that Westover describes most often. The second part of the book covers Westover's studies at BYU, and then kind of transitions over to her time at King's College at Cambridge. She talks about the awards, her continued growth, and at the same time, her continual return to Buck's Peak, and how this sort of struggle played with not only her religious backdrop, but her sort of life as she became more educated and became more cultured and understanding of different things. We come to find that as sheltered as she was, not only was she sort of denied certain history, like the understanding of the civil rights movement or even knowing about the Holocaust, she has also been taught many things and personal remedies that she learns from her mother, who likes to do things organically, holistically, and then this sort of really grounded, down to earth, nose to the grindstone way of working that her father sort of instills in her. And then the last part of the book, in part 3, is where Westover sort of graduates. She completes her PhD, and she goes on to make some very profound realizations and makes some pretty clear transitions in her life. I won't spoil too much, but it is a memoir. But one thing that I will say about Westover's writing is that she does such a great job of writing a story that there were plenty of times where I'm listening to this because I listened to it on Audible. And may I say that, and I can't think of her name right now, but the person doing the audio voiceover, the acting and the reading was fantastic. I do believe she did win an award for it, but kudos to her. I'm so sorry, I'm drawing a blank on her name, but if you have the chance to listen to the audiobook, I would highly recommend it. But Westover does such a great job in recollecting and recalling and writing about her life that there's many times I forget I'm listening to a memoir, and there's times where I get, and this is the skill of a great writer, that I just want to jump into the book and shake Tara, who's the main character, obviously your protagonist, and just really say, like, why aren't you getting it? Why aren't you making these changes? And you learn to love and hate and despise and understand these various characters and family members that go in and out of her life, and that pendulum that swings by the great divine tool that is her perspective and her writing, and her marrying of those two things is just extraordinarily done. And I think it's extremely honest. I don't think she pulls any punches. I think she's also very vulnerable and transparent with the way she tells the story. As stated before, she doesn't paint any overly positive or overly negative pictures of any individual, including herself. She really breaks down her own weaknesses and really illustrates how hard it is to change. I think oftentimes after we've changed or we've had our own growth or metamorphosis or reflection or whatever it is, we look back and we think, oh, this just sort of happened overnight. Or we talk to people in a way where we think these things happened overnight, but we forget that it is a long and gradual process in order to change and to understand change and to make change. And some of the things we see with some of the other family members is that sometimes change doesn't occur, that many times people just end up staying the same, and they fall into same cycles, or they fall into same sort of inherited understandings of things, primarily because of cultural boundaries, of religious boundaries, of psychological boundaries that are put into place, all of which Westover addresses extremely well and touches on very, very intricately in this piece. So again, this is a fantastic book. And just to sort of kind of break down some of the themes that we get from this book, if in the event you wanted to use this particular piece in your class, there are themes of perspective. Not only do we get Tara's perspective on a lot of this, we get a deep dive into her father's psychological makeup, her mother's sort of perspective of the world, her brother Sean's viewpoints on a lot of things. And because she really elaborates and details how they think and how they talk, she doesn't obviously play the omniscient narrator, but she describes and she writes about her family members in such a vivid and complex and intricate way that we really get to know who these people are. And many of the things that we see about them, we see in ourselves. Many of the things we see in them, we don't understand. Many of the things we see in them and that she writes about, we hate and we loathe. But when Tara infuses herself in the relationships with these people, there's almost no way that you can't feel compassion while also feeling just the utmost hatred and loathing for some of the things that they do. And even with Tara herself, like I said, there were times where I just wanted to jump into the book and just shake her and be like, what are you thinking? But again, that's the honesty of the human condition, that we will do things that will make us shake our heads. We will do things that we'll pat ourselves on the back for, and we'll do things that we look back and we regret. But one thing I think she does very well that sometimes many of us don't do is be honest about some of those things. There's themes of curiosity, faith, fear, inheritance, not just financially, but what we inherit from what we're taught and educated, not just in a classroom, but from our parents. And so obviously curiosity is something that is a constant theme that flows throughout, because with each step of the way, we not only see that Tara is curious about what's going on in the outside world, we see other family members have also sort of gone down that path as well and have explored things outside of Buck's Peak, because they know that there is a world outside of that place, and that everything that their mother and father tell them isn't always going to be accurate. Something about it doesn't seem right to them. Obviously, education is one that is a theme that is a constant thread that is gone throughout as well. We see this sort of education in the different ways and interactions and relationships that she has with her father. The back and forth, not only of cultural concepts, but of homeschooling versus public schooling, primarily because of her father's paranoia and bipolar disorder, which Westover sort of diagnoses her father with after she's gone to college and learns about it. We see this sort of medicinal education that her mother tries to instill in her, especially as her mom was a sort of self-taught person as well. We see this sort of worldly education that her brother Sean instills in her, but we also see the misogynistic and the horrible ways in which the world and his perception of the world has sort of molded him, and how a lot of that control and dominance and violence and domestic terror is sort of brought upon the family as well. We also see discussions of culture and mental health, religion, and tribalism. And it was why I think this read was such a compelling one is because we're dealing with a lot of the things that Tara describes, and her father is sort of a microcosm for a lot of that, this sort of paranoid way of thinking that, as we might often call people who are conspiracy theorists or dealing with these levels of paranoia, fear of government takeover and socialism and things of that nature, but don't trust the government, they don't trust education, and then use religion to sort of be the backdrop for their moral compass. And so these are things that we see in the book that are reiterated over and over. And if you were going to use this in the class, any one of those themes could be different points of conversation or lesson plans, especially if you're doing this book as a read for the class, or a book that your class is going to cover throughout a semester. I would definitely say even doing a lesson plan or a piece where you can kind of talk about different characters in contrast with some of the different worldly aspects. So looking at a character like Jean, her father, and sort of addressing some of these ongoing issues of tribalism, of conspiracy theories, and contrasting some of his ideas in the book with modern day discussions of tribalism or conspiracy theories, or doing a psychological analysis on characters like her mother, Faye, or her brother, Sean, and looking at issues of domestic violence, or looking at issues of different sort of medicinal aspects in terms of modern medicine versus traditional or holistic medicine. And so each of those sort of contrastive topics, I think, would definitely be fascinating conversations to have in a class, and would definitely be great for debate, would be great for argumentation projects, would be great for analytical projects, evaluative projects as well. And that's something that you could make potentially into a one classroom discussion or a drawn out project, if that's something that you wanted to do throughout a longer set of time. Lastly, in terms of rating, as we wrap this thing up, I can't speak any higher of a book. Like I said, between James Clear's Habits and this piece by Tara Westover and Educated, both great 5 out of 5 books, both great educational pieces, personal, cultural, perspective pieces that really give you some great insight into a world that, like I said, with James Clear, that we might be familiar with, but we don't really get to do the deep dive until we see someone else sort of unearth it and bring it to life. So 5 out of 5, 5 stars, grade A, fantastic piece. If you want to grab the book, grab the book. If you want to listen to the Audible version, audiobook, I would highly recommend that as well. I can't speak highly enough about Westover's piece. And a little bit of envy and jealousy is she's younger than I am, and she's already gone into such acclaim and done such a great job with this. And so that's also motivation for anyone out there who's looking just to go out and do it, and doesn't mean that you can't learn or unlearn different things, as Tara has taught us in this piece as well. So fantastic read, highly recommend. Go out, get yourself a copy, get yourself a listen. Next time on our book review, it actually won't be a book. It will be the podcast for the Trojan Horse Affair. This was a podcast from the people who brought you S-Town, and it is another great piece that will talk about a sort of mystery that unfolds to sort of show us a larger picture dealing with racism, prejudice, Islamophobia, and all these intricate and unwieldy mystery as we sort of unravel what happened in Birmingham in the UK. And that's next time on the Classroom Hacks Book Review.